Hi guys, this is Eric Cressey, and this is going to be the last installment of our Acumobility rolling in the upper extremity/neck. I think this is an important one to cover last because it's a little bit of a debated point on what you should do with it. So we're going to talk about the upper traps today. So upper traps are a little bit interesting because different people will have tone there for different reasons. So first we'll demo it and then we'll kind of talk about why you might use it in certain situations. So Nick's going to demonstrate it. You notice he's down a little bit lower. You can actually put some direct pressure in here. It's hard to see because of the post, but he's actually moving his head up and away in the opposite direction, so we put a little bit more of a stretch on that upper trap, okay? So with that said, just like all other neck ones, you wanna make sure you're really, really gentle with this. Again, this is a 1 or a 2 out of 10 on the intensity scale, okay? So we'll have Nick stand right up. What we're gonna talk about as we look at his shoulder blades from the back is there gonna be different reasons why an upper trap may feel tight, okay? So really commonly, particularly in our baseball athletes, we'll see really, really low shoulders where they have like an aggressive downslope. See this a lot in an extension bias population that does a lot of lifting, competes in extension rotation sports, where what'll happen is they'll become very lat dominant. That whole shoulder girdle will sit lower and lower and lower. And what may happen is they get so dense and fibrotic and nasty and short through the bottom that that upper trap may be lengthened to the max. We know that your upper trap is really important for driving a portion of the scapular upward rotation that we need for an overhead motion. So if you have someone who has a really, really downslope shoulder, that tightness in their upper trap may actually be a protective tension. It may be their body laying down that trigger point just to basically try to find stability wherever they can. So in those situations, you have to be really, really careful about just always doing that. Classic example of these folks, they feel tight, somebody gives them a massage, they feel good for 2 or 3 minutes, and then a few minutes later, it's right back to being where it was. So be careful about taking that protective tension away for someone who sits really, really low. With that said, you will also see individuals that have upper trap dominance for a few different reasons. The first is if you have a really aggressive scapular anterior tilt, if that shifts really, really far forward, something we see commonly in people who spend all day at computers, a lot of the adult rotator cuff folks that we'll see, what it does is it kind of creates this awkward situation, let me step back just a little bit, where because that scap is so anteriorly tilted, it can't get the posterior tilt and rotation that you get from lower traps and serratus anterior to drive that good upward rotation. So if you're really tilted forward, the only solution to go overhead is to really, really elevate through the upper traps and also the levator scapulae. So in those situations, toning down a little bit here can sometimes make it easier for folks to get that posterior tilt, to get that rotation around the rib cage. So in those instances, some upper trap soft tissue work can actually make a big difference, particularly when we know that trigger points may cause headaches, some of the shoulder symptoms that we see as well, especially when you roll in levator scapulae with upper traps and realize they can refer all over the place. The other thing you have to remember is there are going to be times when you have rotator cuff tears where folks actually have to go into a shrugging pattern. We know your supraspinatus, your most common rotator cuff injury, is really going to be responsible for that first 15 degrees or so of abduction before the deltoid kicks in and brings you up. So what will happen is if you don't have a good approximation that comes from the rotator cuff and the deltoid attaches right down here, the whole shoulder girdle comes up together into a shrug instead of having that good rotational component. So in those individuals with cuff tears, it may actually help to give them some symptomatic relief if they get some soft tissue work in there, just because that upper trap and levator scapulae are gonna be so overused to make up for the fact that their supraspinatus isn't really helping to suck that ball back into the socket. So make sure you understand static posture. If it's tilted forward, if it's really, really elevated, probably a good idea to try some soft tissue work in here, whether it's with the Acumobility or a qualified manual therapist. If it's really, really, really low, be very cautious about trying it because you may be taking away some of the stability that actually helps them to feel good.